Be the Best You podcast. The sole purpose of this podcast is to teach, inspire, and motivate everyone to be the best versions of themselves. Welcome back for another episode of the Be the Best You podcast. I'm your host, Larry Dawson. So today we have a super cool guest. She's a relationship coach, but not just a relationship with your partners, but a relationship all around with yourself, family members. So I'm going to let her introduce herself and tell her all the amazing things she has going on. Mara, please break down exactly who you are, what got you started, and all the different things you have going on.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. My name is Mara Palermo. Like he was saying, I'm a relationship coach, and but I also owned a salon for 20 years. I've been in the business for a long time, and so I'm originally from Buffalo, New York area. So when I started years ago doing that, it's over the years I kind of developed this beauty therapist, if you will, relationship with other clients, very intimate setting, and was able to really see a lot of like patterns over the years of like what went on in relationships with women, right? So it's like one minute they're going through a divorce, next minute they find someone, there's 99% of the conversations was always around relationships. And so that really, I guess I was able to really start to hold that space for women, really be able to connect with women on that level. And then over the years, when I was going through my own journey of relationships and going through like roller coaster events with that, I really started to go inward and to start to do work on myself. And I think that really started to spill out into my clients. And so then realizing that I wanted to work with them on a deeper level, and so that's when I started to start coaching them, on relationships. And like you were saying, it's not just relationships with intimate partners, but it really, one, it's the relationship with yourself, and then two, it's the people that are around you, but there are relationships to everything. There's relationships to boundaries, there's relationships to your health, there's relationships to everything. So one of the things that I do specialize in is working with healing people's attachment styles. I really work on discovering where they fall on that spectrum and where they have some of these patterns and habits and behaviors that are showing up that maybe just aren't serving them, it's not serving the relationship, so that we can dive deep into that, start creating new strategies, start creating healthier ways that they can relate to themselves, and then also create healthier relationships so that they start to feel more secure in themselves, safer in themselves, so that they can have safe and secure relationships with others.
How long have you been focused on just working with people, relationships? How long have you been doing that now?
Well, I would say, I feel like it's been forever, to be honest. I would say the past 4 years, because I was going to work with another relationship coach then, and it kind of fell through. But then I started to do coaching with someone else. I had a business partner, and we were focusing a lot on like mindset, and people, when they were coming to us, it was a lot maybe about business, and then there was some like relational thing. And so then I started to pivot more to the relationship, because that's just more of like what I'm in alignment with, I didn't really want to do the business coaching, but I wanted to be able to create different ways people related to each other, because I was finding that was one of the core things. So I would say, the past few years has been my focus.
So it's funny, you talked about coming up and working in like the hair salons and the beauty industry and helping people coaching and stuff. So regardless of what I went to school for or have certificates for a while I was doing physical fitness, and people, in the gym, the guys, it was the exact same scenario but reversed. Yeah. Right? So then I started to use some of the things, some of, my certificates and schooling and stuff to do life coaching. Mm-hmm. And my two specialties that I am really good at helping people with is overcoming trauma and their finances.
Nice.
So, people will come to you about all kinds of different things, and you try to help them through it and talk them through it and work with them through it. That just happens to be the two things that I'm really good at, and those are my specialties at helping people with those things. But I'm really fascinated with relationships. The reason I'm really fascinated with relationships is because of a couple reasons. One, the first half of my life was really rough. I went through a lot of things as a child and as a young man, and lost my freedom over it, and was gone for quite some time. During that time, one of the things I did was I changed my entire life, but it started with self and understanding myself and the relationship with myself, and just growing as a human being and building from within and building a structure and knowing who I am, what I want, what makes me tick, how I can become better, the things I need to change, the things I need to work on. So that to me was the very first thing I did. So I worked on fixing the relationship with self, and then when I came home, building businesses and doing different stuff. But any relationship that I would have or dealing with people, I think it made it easier for me because I had worked on the self part first. And I think too many times people only want to look outwardly at others, don't want to look inwardly at self. And when you find yourself in a relationship and you have been someone that has dug in, and you start pushing someone else to dig in, sometimes that doesn't work out too well.
It doesn't. Yes.
But if they will, man, the possibilities are limitless.
Yeah.
They could become so much better versions of themselves. So I had another lady on here, and obviously your fields are the same, but your views and takes and the way you go about things are a lot different.
Right.
And also I had someone on here, a gentleman last week that I interviewed, and his wife is a therapist, but she also puts on couples retreats. And we dug into those and how important those are. And he said in there, if you think you're going to come to this retreat and bash your partner needs to fix this, he said you're wrong, because this is about fixing yourself and them fixing themselves and then you being better because of it. So I completely agree with that mindset and that method. How important is it for not only us to develop a strong relationship and know ourselves within, but also how important is that if we're going to have healthy relationships with others?
Well, that's a great question, because if you think about it, that's the number one relationship is with ourselves. But oftentimes, like you were saying, we're told even at a young age, take care of your sister, do this, look after this person. It's always outside, or do this for your mom. Oh, I want to make my mom proud. It's you're always focusing sometimes on other people, and so then you get to a point where you're just what about me? And so, but sometimes it doesn't come out like that. It's just there's just this roller coaster of events that might happen for you to start to look inward. And the reason why it's so important is because, one, if you don't know what you are needing, if what your basic needs are, like you're saying, what makes you tick, how can you, and you're not giving that to yourself, you're not going to be even able to be a space to receive it from somebody else. So we're so conditioned to always want to help other people, but if you're not really helping yourself, then you're operating from an empty cup, right? So it's how are you able to give it to yourself? And then you're looking for all these outside things to try to fill this cup. But if you're really understanding what it is that you need, and also what is it that's those core beliefs or those core wounds that really set you off. So for example, if you really have a fear of abandonment, then you really need to work through some of that stuff first, because then you're always going to be operating from that space of I need to have this person stay, and then you can become very codependent on other people. And so again, someone leaves, you're not going to know how to handle yourself, and then you go and you find another thing to kind of fill that cup. So when you start to really understand what your needs are, and you're starting to give it to yourself first, then what happens is you're priming your subconscious mind to say it's okay to receive. I'm okay, I got this for me, and then it's also you're ready to open up to other people. So it's very important because if you know how to, self-soothe or take care of, emotionally regulate, because that's a huge thing, right? So if I get triggered and it's like, but I'm putting all this focus on other people and this person did this and this person did this, then it's like I'm giving my power away.
Very true. I read an article the other day. I can't remember who it was. Obviously, it was some type of celebrity or something, or it wouldn't have been in the news. And I usually don't read that type of stuff. I read it because of this right here. This person had a family member recently die, and they went to the gym to work out, and people were shaming them because we're basically like, how could you be going to work out to the gym right now? You just lost this family member. And the first thing that came to my mind was, first of all, why are you worried about this person judging this person?
Right.
Right? Why aren't you looking within? Why are you looking without? We just talked about that. You're judging someone else. And then people have different ways of coping. So like we was just saying, you have to know yourself. If you lose someone and you're going through a tragedy and you're feeling pain on the inside, who are you to tell me how to deal with that grief? So would it be okay if I laid around and ate a bunch of bad food? Right. And now I gain weight and I feel worse about myself, or I get sick because of what I'm putting in my body? Would that make you happier if I ate bad food? Instead of like, I'm going to go to the gym, I'm going to work out, I'm going to let some of this frustration off of me because I have anger built up inside of me right now, and I'm going to let it out in a healthy way.
Right.
Or if you lay in bed all day long and don't go to work, like, I'm not judging anyone for how they grieve or how they go through things, but how dare you judge someone else for how they deal with it? Obviously, that person knows self, and that person's taken a healthy step to get through it and not choosing a bad method. Because if you watch TV will tell you, oh, you're going through a breakup. Oh, you just had a death in the family. Just lay in bed, eat you some pints of ice cream. Yeah. What good is that doing? Anybody?
No. And I think that's one of the things, like you were saying, in the media, it is part of the programming stems from that, right? It's like what people have told you to do, how they do it, what you see on TV, what a celebrity is doing. So if they're doing, like you said, like even if it's in a video, right, that you're like watching some kind of music video, and that's how they're laying around, they're coping, they're doing all the things like in that depressed state, right? It's kind of like, well, I just saw that on the video, so it's like it must be okay, right? Whatever the celebrities do, whatever this person does, it's like, well, that's how I should be coping with things. And then again, you're taking on other people's stuff, which you're not even tapping in to say like, well, what do I need in this moment to feel, safe again, or just to comfort? Like, what does that comfort look like? And plenty of times, a lot of people don't realize that there are, yes, healthy ways, and so they tend to go for what's fast and easy. So it's like that ice cream. Well, I'd rather do this because it might take too much energy and effort to go to the gym to do something that's like healthy. But again, it goes back to how do you view yourself? Because if your self-esteem or your self-worth is maybe lower, you might tend to go for something that's maybe not as healthy. But how is it that you can build yourself up, right, and do something for you that's going to be, that's just healthier for you? But a lot of times it takes more effort to do that. But you're right. It's like, who is somebody to judge someone else and how they grieve, right? They might not even know there's so much going on inside of you that if this is what they feel is the best way to get them through that, then let them do it.
I remember when Tony Dungy, I don't know if you know who Tony Dungy is. He's a legendary NFL coach. He was coach of a couple teams, but the Colts for several years, Tampa Bay before that, and he won a Super Bowl with Peyton Manning and them. During one of his last seasons, his son committed suicide, his young son. He hung himself, and it was a very tragic event. And I thought, like, as someone that has kids, like, I felt that pain, man. And I don't know if people ever put themselves in other people's shoes. I felt that, and I was like, oh my God, I couldn't imagine that. This man, like, he didn't miss any football games. He still coached those games. They won a championship. People rallied behind him. He's a broadcaster on television now, and I remember there was some criticism coming out about him, like, why is he coaching right now? He shouldn't be doing this. He shouldn't be doing that. It's so easy for people to sit on the sidelines and criticize, But I remember when my mother passed away. My mother passed away a few years ago at a very young age, at 64 years old. A heart attack just completely out of the blue. And I had a speaking engagement scheduled for 4 days later. And I think everybody thought I was going to cancel the speaking engagement, but I didn't. I actually went and I gave a speech, and there was quite a few people there that I know, and I could see when I was talking, looking through the crowd, they were crying. And, you know, I thought to myself in that moment, because a couple people said to me, like, why are you doing this, Larry? Your mother just passed away. You don't need to prove anything to anybody, or blah, blah, blah. But I wasn't proving anything to anybody. I thought about it. I evaluated the situation and said, should I do this speech or not? And what I thought to myself was, I was sitting down and I was thinking, and I thought to myself, my mom would literally look at me and be like, boy, get up and show them the man you are. Don't be sitting around feeling sorry. Go show them who you are. Yeah. Help them out. Go up there, give them your speech. Be the man I raised you to be. I'll be proud of you. Get up there. So I was like, you know what? That's what my mom would be saying to me to do, so that's what I'm going to go do. I feel like Tony Dungy was probably in the same situation. I feel like he probably thought his son would have wanted him to go out there and coach and go on and win in the playoffs and win the Super Bowl and be proud of his dad. So just knowing self, being in tune with self, not letting others dictate your moods or your personalities or how you are. I feel like that's the issue. A lot of people don't really know themselves. And if you don't really know yourself, then you will let, like you said, a TV show or a video or your coworkers or friends or other people or the news influence you to make you think and act a certain way, and you don't even know yourself. Like, what do you really like? What really makes you happy? What really pushes you this way or that way? Is it what they're telling you on the news? Is it what they're telling you in a video? Is it what you're reading? Or are these actually your opinions and your thoughts and feelings?
Yep, absolutely. I think what was huge for me was when I really started to open myself up to possibility. I just started to realize, I questioned a lot of things, because I was like, where did this belief even come from? You know, like I was like thinking of like certain things, like the way that I wanted to dress, or the way I was going about doing different things in my life, right? And I started to question, like, well, why am I doing this? Like, am I doing this because like I was just told to do this? Is this something that I really want to do? And I think like what you were talking about when you were talking about the coach, and even for yourself, that wasn't just, you didn't just like wake up that day and just pull yourself off the floor and say, hey, I'm going to go and do this. That's years of building yourself to get to that point where when something major does happen, you have that emotional resilience.
That's
right?
So true what you just said.
Yeah, right? I mean, like building that up. So when something is, you're not going to cave. You don't have to just be like, oh my God, I'm going to just lose myself. But that's how a lot of people operate. You can't say something to them. You can't, challenge them in any way, because they are so hollow inside that it just almost like they'll just collapse in. And it's like, okay, well, whatever you said, then they're, they don't know how to like just stand in their own being.
Yeah.
So to your point, like, yeah, it's like what you're saying has nothing to do with it. You're looking at it from a standpoint of, I'm feeling my emotions, not saying that you're not feeling your emotions, you're not suppressing them, you are, but you're channeling them in a different way so that you can still show up, so that you can still show people like, hey, yeah, I'm going through something, and I can still show up for myself and my commitments.
You know, this isn't about sex, but as a man, I look at that as being a leader. Right. My mom would have said to me, stand up, be the man I raised you to be, and go out there and lead and show them. And I know that's what she would have said to me, so that's how I took that on as like, she's right. Like, she raised you to be this type of man. This is the type of man you are. Go be that type of man. Go inspire and lead other people and show people that life is tough, and tough things happen in life. That's life. I don't care where you came from. I don't care what your economic standing is. I don't care what race or religion you are. At some point in time, life is going to hit you, and life's going to hit you hard. Are you going to be ready for those moments? Yeah. How are you going to handle those moments? And it doesn't mean that you're not grieving or you don't feel pain. It means that you are trained and conditioned to be able to handle those situations, because life isn't just going to stop. Life's going to continue to go until we're no longer here, and throughout that time, there's going to be trials and tribulations, and things are going to come at you.
Yep, absolutely, and that's like you just said is really what it is. It is leadership. It's like, I mean, things happen all the time. I mean, whether if you're the president of the United States, a coach, like there's so much that's at stake, right? You have these like high stake relationships that mean something to you. So it's like you want to be able to show up. You can, and like I was saying, it's like you said, it's not that you're ignoring things or suppressing things, but at the same time, you're still able to have both and kind of flow through all of that. But that really, again, it comes back from you building yourself up to that point, over and over and over again.
By putting in that self-work, getting to know self. So I got a couple questions that I picked for you, and I also had other people send me some questions, and I chose a few of them. So one of them is, when you talk about relationships, the first thing that goes into everyone's mind is relationship with a significant other. Mm-hmm. But how important is the relationship to have with ourselves?
It's the most important thing, because at the end of the day, if you really think about how, like you were just saying, like life, there's curveballs all the time, right? So it's like you go to school, you leave, some of the friends that you meet that, they might just go in like different directions, right? You're not gonna always have the same friends. There's times you're in a relationship, this person's not always gonna be there for you. You might break up, your parents, like at some point throughout the day and throughout your life, you're going to be alone. It's going to be you, always. That is the one person that is not gonna leave you ever, is yourself. So oftentimes we're trying to like stay close to people and want that because we want to feel connected inside. But it's so important to have that type of connection with yourself, because then if so-and-so breaks up with you, let's say, that you're not going to fall apart, right? Because you still have your self-worth, and you still have you, and you're like, I still have me, right? I'm not totally left, and I'm not totally abandoned. I'm not alone forever, but it's just like this didn't work out. You start to have a different kind of mindset when it comes to like people. However, if you don't have that sense of self, then it's like you could say go through a breakup, and then like next week you're like, oh, you have like a new boyfriend, right? But it's just like there's no healing there. There's no really like getting to know yourself, and then you kind of fall back into the same thing. So it's like it's almost the health of your relationships will dictate, like how they can go if once you really start to form a relationship with yourself. And it's not easy, because like you were saying, it's like we're so conditioned to look outwards that you have to start looking inwards and say like, well, what do I like? And what is it that I want? And then I think what happens over time is like people almost have these fears or these doubts that it's like, I can't really have that. I'm not worthy enough to have that. But they're not, so they just kind of take, what they can get or whatever comes their way, right? But then it's like, as you start to choose you and you start ending like the self-betrayal and abandoning yourself, then you start to feel like having these friendships is an addition to your life, not necessarily like, I need this, I want this, I can't live without it.
Which what you should have said is a much healthier relationship. Also, if you guys did not catch that, she said the most important relationship in this world is the relationship with self. Stop looking without and start looking within. You cannot truly find happiness in others until you find happiness in yourself first. So the next question that I have for you is, how does your relationship with self impact your ability to have successful relationship with others?
Wow, yeah, so it's a huge impact, right? So, because if you don't have, say, boundaries or within yourself, if you don't have certain levels of respect for yourself, if you keep committing to things that you want to do and you're not showing up for your own self, right there is a huge indication of how it's going to impact your relationships. Right, so if you're saying like, oh, I want to go to the gym today, and then you just like don't. I'm gonna get up early. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do that. But you like never do that. When you start to show up for another person, it's gonna, that's your pattern. Like it's going to show up, because everywhere you go, there you are. Right, so it doesn't matter.
Can't run from yourself.
You can't, and that's the whole thing too. Is like when you start to look at yourself, you're like, wow, like I'm totally investing in somebody else. So again, if it comes to like boundaries, let's say, and commitments, and you get into a relationship, and you like this person or whatever, and you're just focusing all your attention on them, and you're doing whatever, and you're again not doing things for yourself. Like maybe you're abandoning going to the gym for yourself, but you're gonna go and hang out with this person. Over time, what that does is it just starts to again, like I was talking about your cup is like empty. And if you're focusing on trying to get it from somebody on the outside, it's like these little drops of water in the bucket, right? But then and then over time, you're just like, you feel like you're giving all yourself and everything to this relationship, right? Because you're not giving anything to yourself. And then you start to resent this person, or you feel empty because you're like, well, they're not doing this for me, or you just feel like you're just operating from, an empty gas tank, right? So when you start to take the time to be like, I'm gonna work out, I'm gonna commit to that, what you're doing is, one, you're building a confidence within yourself, you're showing yourself that you can show up for yourself, and then you show powerfully in a relationship, right? So you kind of know, like, hey, I would love to see you, I'd love to hang out, but this is kind of like what I have going on, so let's figure something out instead of just completely abandoning everything that you want to do for yourself. So that's how I find that it can impact a relationship. The other thing too is, we all have stuff, right? We all have past traumas. We all have things that, are unfortunate that has happened to us, right? So again, if you're not taking care of that, and you have like these huge like wounds that are like internal, all you're going to keep doing is just picking that scab and picking that scab. But then when you get into this relationship, you're just going to be bleeding all over this person too. So it's really important to understand, like, hey, like, I realize that this is something that really affects me. I realize I have some kind of trust issues, or I realize, I have this, and being so aware of like what's going on inside. One, again, it's like, no one's perfect. However, you're also being able to put the time and attention into you, so that when you get into another relationship with somebody else, now it's kind of like you understand what's going on in your makeup. So then you can also start to create those boundaries with somebody else, or just being like, hey, like, what your triggers are, right? So it's kind of like being proactive. Because if not, then you go into a relationship, you're bringing all this baggage, and then it's just going to be,
Have you
up and
noticed?
down relationships.
Sorry, I'm going to cut
Yeah,
you
go
off.
ahead.
Have you noticed that when you do have a man or a woman that is like self-aware, self-confident, and understands themselves, and they meet a woman or a man, and that particular person they meet is not,
Yeah.
that person is intimidated or turned off because this particular person is, and they're like, there's almost like they're scared a little bit, because they're like, holy crap, they can't handle that.
Yeah, no, exactly. Because what it's doing, like, well, if you think about it, right, like relationships are just mirroring back. It's like a reflection of like what's going on inside of you.
Mm-hmm.
So if you show up powerfully and you have this confidence, you kind of know yourself, and you're just like, oh, I don't. You're shining that light back to me,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so inside, again, they might look outward and be like, oh, this person's, oh, she's too masculine, she's too confident, she's too this, she's too that, right? She's too much. But it's like, really internally, you're just saying that, like, I'm not enough. Like, that's how you might be really, it's resonating, it's hitting home for you, but you don't want to actually look inward.
So you'd rather point outward.
You'd rather point and be like, oh, well, she's this, or oh, well, they're that. And it's like, no, really, I'm just feeling a little insecure about my own self.
Yeah,
right?
Because their confidence and self-aware scares them. And unfortunately, I know a lot of people that's happened to.
Yeah.
And vice versa. And I know people prey on other people. I watched my mom get preyed on her whole life. So there's one thing from doing a lot of studying of psychology myself, is that there's givers and there's takers, right?
Yeah.
So when you have a giver and a taker in a relationship, man, that can turn out really bad, because no matter how much that giver gives, the taker will never be satisfied. They'll just take and take and take and take until eventually one day they break the giver. Unfortunately, I have a few friends right now that are in those type of relationships. So, I might say something here or there, but I, try to stay in my lane. I'm trying to, like, unless they ask me, you know. But I feel bad when I see those situations, because I understand that those relationships are a one-way street, and that person that's the taker will give the giver just enough here and there to keep them around and feeling good about the situation, but in the end of the day, it's just about them taking. What advice would you give to those type of people that are in those situations out there? Like, if you could just give them a big wake-up call.
Well, I mean, again, it's like, I think that goes back to, like I was saying before, the givers that are wanting to give to somebody, to usually sometimes what happens is that I find it's because they're afraid to be alone, or they're afraid, like, they just don't want to be abandoned, right? That's another huge one. They're afraid that they don't want to be disliked, or unloved. And so what happens is, usually if you go back to like childhood, it's one of those things where they weren't maybe really able to be like to learn how to self-soothe, and sometimes it's like they were the ones taking care of the caregivers, right? Or it's like taking, like I said, take care of your brother, or doing this or doing that, so you're not really able to kind of like give to yourself and take that time to self-soothe and emotionally regulate yourself. And so what happens then over time, because you're so focused on outward, that's how your dynamics start to become in relationships. So you're just programmed to give, but then at the same time, you're operating from this like empty cup. So then over time, that's where you start to feel taken advantage of. I feel this, I feel that. And usually people that are like that don't have boundaries. So I think that's one of the things where it's like coming back to what is the core, like what's going on really at the core of that, and realizing, taking that look and say like, okay, so let's say this person just disappears tomorrow. How would you feel about that? Like, what is it that would come up? And maybe they would say like, well, I don't want to be alone, or so sometimes people will just go into a relationship subconsciously, they want it just because they don't want to be alone. And that's almost like a negative, the negative vision, right? It's like going into a relationship because you just want to add that to your life is a different way of looking at it than to like, yeah, I need this because I don't want to be alone.
What advice, if you know someone that's a giver that's in a bad relationship that continues to give and happens to be in a relationship with someone that's a taker that continues to take, what's like a wake-up piece of advice that you could give to them, like signs to look for that maybe you're in an unhealthy relationship and that you're in a relationship with a taker, and that no matter what you do, it's not going to be enough?
Well, I think it's check your energy. When you're around this person, do you feel drained? Because like, how like you can go around somebody and like you can perk up, you see someone, you're like, oh, like they're awesome. And then like there's sometimes you just look around people, you're just like, wow, yeah, this is going to be a lot. I need to prepare myself, and so being able to see when you're not with this person, is this person actually taking the time to reach out to you? That's what I would say, like start to see like the patterns, start to see the behaviors as well. Are you always the one reaching out for the phone call, to call them or get in touch with them, and see how that plays out? Because then at least it's like, then you can kind of see like, okay, I'm usually the one initiating everything, or it's like it's not really reciprocated. And then again, it's like noticing how you feel. Like if this person is always giving, and it's like never enough for this other person, then it's definitely time to have like a conversation to check in with each other, to just be like, well, where are you at with this, and create a boundary. That's the whole thing. It's kind of like, all right, so let's say you're always going over to this person's house and maybe they're not coming to see you ever, right? So then it's kind of like, I'd love to see you, how about, you come to me this time? And then you start to see, here's the actual thing, is when you start to set boundaries, you start to see who's really for you. Because, you start to, if you're like, hey, I don't want to do this, you start to see how people react to your boundaries. But most people are afraid to set them because they feel like, one, they don't want to like lose the person, or two, they're going to be mad at me or something like that. But and they can be subtle, but just like little boundaries, because obviously you want to start to learn how to do that. But when you start to set them, then you start to see, okay, is this person going to show up for me or not? And that's a huge indication right there.
I have this belief personally that you have to stand for something or you'll fall for anything.
Yes.
So, I believe that, and I would give this piece of advice to any friend of mine or anyone else out there that's listening to this content, if you are a giver and you are in a relationship with someone's a taker, no matter how much you give, it will never be enough. So unfortunately, you are probably not in a relationship that you are meant to be in.
Yeah.
All right, so the next question is, from my personal experience in the coaching world, one thing that has stood out to me is that most people do not love themselves properly or have a good relationship with themselves. What advice would you give to people out there that are struggling to love themselves and have a good relationship with themselves?
Oh, such a good one. Because I remember, like, I'm trying to think back when I was going through something for myself, and sometimes it's a challenge, right, to look in the mirror if you're really not feeling it for yourself, you know? And that was a huge thing. So being able to take that second to just see you for who you are is so hard. So I know that one of the things that was really helpful for me was, one, it was hard for me to write things down. And maybe it's, you know, characteristics or things you like about yourself, but you start to actually make a list of them. When you start to do that, your mind starts to kind of to filter out and find more good things. But sometimes if you really have a hard time doing that, one of the things that I did before was I reached out to 5 people that I was close with, that I was like, knew that were really good people in my circle. That I was like, okay, I reached out to them. I was like, what are my strengths? What are the weaknesses that you see in me? And what is a pattern that I keep repeating over and over again that you can see on the outside? And it was huge for me because I was able to see things that I wasn't seeing for my own self. But I was like, oh, like, I didn't realize I was so compassionate, or I didn't realize this, I didn't realize that. But the weaknesses too was like, it wasn't like any, like, it wasn't like negative, but that you could just see where it's kind of like, maybe it's like, all right, I can be really distracted, or it's like, you know, stuff like that, which is fine, because again, it starts to build that awareness. And then it's like you can take steps towards that. And one of the things was, like, I remembered even someone that was like the patterns that I was like repeating, and I was just kind of like, wow, like I didn't even realize like that was happening. But once I had that type of like information, then it was like I was able to start to work on these things in a different way. And that was actually where, this was like a long time ago, but that was really where I started to dive so deep into like relationships, because I was like, well, why is that? You know, why do I keep doing that? And I wasn't aware of it. But that's a helpful way to start building like that self-love and to see yourself in a different way.
But you just answered, like, you know, when I originally talked to you about me being away and digging into myself and everything, you know, obviously I had a long time out, so I had a lot of spare time on my hands to dig within on a level that most people never will.
Yeah.
But you did that, you know, on your own free will because you wasn't happy with certain things. I wish more people out there that are watching and listening would take the time to do that and to dig within themselves and do what you did. You know, to have a list of negative, positives, and then patterns, and reach out to people that are close to you, and not your yes men.
No.
Because everybody has yes men close to them, but I don't really like yes men. Like, I prefer real men.
Yeah.
They're going to keep it real with me. And, you know, if I said to you, hey man, give me from what you see from the outside, what are my 3 strengths? What are my 3 weaknesses? And what's one stupid pattern that I repeat?
Yeah.
You know, if you are able to actually do that, which is very smart on your hand, and to take that information and to apply it, almost like if it was you were in college and they gave you an essay to study, you know, for the exam, that is how you find self. That's how you develop self. That's how you break patterns, start new patterns, understand your weaknesses and strengths, develop strategies to become better. But like, we're so distracted with, you know, this 24-hour cycle of news and reality television and TikTok and hanging out with our friends and binge watching shows, and we would rather do anything and everything than to make ourselves better and look within. Man, what she just gave you guys is some super solid knowledge, and I know it changed my life. Obviously it changed her life. I've been able to help several other people with that same method change their lives. She's a coach that does this on an everyday basis, so she's been able to help people change their lives. if you are struggling in any type of way, the knowledge that she just gave you is amazing. Take the time out and apply that to your life and watch the changes that will happen for the better. I promise you this, if you apply the knowledge she just gave you, nothing negative will come from it. Only positive.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right, because I was like, at first I was like, oh God, what are the people going to say? But then I was just willing, to just sit with
To
that.
be vulnerable.
Yeah, to be vulnerable, to sit with it, and to ask people. And then and it was like, it started with like 5 people. And then I just started asking more and more, because then I was curious. But then I was even curious to see, well, how am I showing up with my clients, at work? So like at that time, this was like I said, a long time ago, where I had a salon then. So being able to show up for my clients in a way, a different kind of way, right? Because I was a little bit more like withdrawn, disconnected, and I think I really wanted to be able to break out of my shell too. But you start to realize that, you start to see like, oh, well, I could, what's like one little thing, and it doesn't have to be some major changes, but it's like, what's one little thing? And it was when I was seeing people, one of the things that I was doing was giving them genuine compliments. Like, what is one thing that you can do that I was like putting myself like out there, like trying to get out of my shell, but like even when I would see them, it's just like being able to connect with somebody. So seeing something that's like, oh my God, I love your hair, I love your whatever, just like giving them that type of like, a compliment or something that's sincere, of course.
Yeah.
But that opened up a lot more dialogue. It opened up, I was noticing how just like people would light up, or it just created a different type of like energy back and forth.
It forced you to come out your shell a little bit
yes,
too.
exactly.
Yeah. So I always tell people one of the most uncomfortable places that you could ever be in is a comfort zone. If you're in a comfort zone, you're not in a good spot. I don't give a damn what anybody close to you is telling you. You have yes men close to you and they're lying to you.
Yeah.
If you're in a comfort zone, you're not in a good spot. You should make yourself leave your comfort zone and make yourself uncomfortable, because your most progress and the best things you will accomplish is when you step outside of your comfort zone.
Absolutely.
So kudos to you for doing that.
Yeah.
Much respect. So, all right, let's dive into some more of these questions. What's 3 helpful tips you could give to people that are already in relationships to make them better?
Oof. I think. Okay, to make them better.
Just 3 quick tips.
Yes, 3 quick tips. I think it's just one is just no distractions, and having set times to just like sit with each other and talk. I think a lot of times it's like people just get so busy, doing different things, or they have this going on, that going on, but really making that effort just to reconnect, to just talk about like whether it's their day. Another thing is creating agreements. So talking about things that might keep, like if there are things that keep coming up, right, that are going on that you really want to say like break from.
Okay.
So it's just like, hey, what is it that, if you're like, when I come home, I really just you need some time to just be with yourself. But like maybe, your wife's there, but she wants to like talk to you, right? So there's like, it could create some kind of tension. So maybe the agreement is like, hey, I'm gonna come home 30 minutes, this is what I'm gonna do, and then, at 30 minutes later, we can sit down and then we can do whatever, X, Y, and Z. Because I feel like with the agreements, it's also creating certainty, so you almost know what's gonna happen, instead of like walking into, something that's just gonna like...
You're not ready for it.
You're not ready for it, exactly. So I think there's that.
One more, give us one more.
One more, I think, one of the things is being able to still be individuals.
Okay.
I think so. The tip there is just being able to like, you have your relationship, which is obviously a priority, but also still being able to have your own hobbies or your own things, so that you can still develop yourself as a human, and have your own growth and opportunity, right? Instead of like, again, being everything, like too much of like the relationship.
Yeah. So the 3 quick tips that she gave you guys was to make time to sit down and talk and enjoy each other's company. No distractions, no TVs, no cell phones. No kids, no parents, just the two of you spend a little bit of quality time together. Second, some agreements. Like the scenario she gave you. If one of you have a very stressful job or a very physical job and you need a 30-minute cool down zone when you come home, and that's an agreement you make, you know, whatever those agreements are, you know, they can be helpful and stick to them. And so if you guys were looking for some tips, those are some really good tips. And what was the last one you suggested again?
It's still being able to do things individually.
To be yourself?
Yep, to be yourself, to be able to have that autonomy and, and if it's a hobby, if you like to paint, whatever it is, something that is good for you, that feeds your soul, do that. Because I can assure you, if it's, you're able to do that for yourself, then you'll be able to have more fulfillment in your relationship.
Yeah, like I'm a big blues music fan, and I know I get on my wife's last nerve with it, but she just lets me enjoy it and be great, and I appreciate her for that.
Exactly.
So yeah. Alright, so the next question is, what have you encountered dealing with pride, ego, and selfishness that hinders relationships? I almost dropped my phone on this one just now, like you dropped the mic. This question, oh boy. You about to hurt some feelings on this question, girl. Let me read that to you one more time. What have you encountered dealing with pride, the downfall, pride, ego, another downfall, and selfishness, the ultimate downfall, that hinders relationships?
Yeah.
Woo!
That's a big one.
Do you think that people understand their pride, their ego, and their selfishness is the reason that probably they're not in good situations most of the time?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not, because it's like that self-deprivation, right? You're just like literally, it's like taking the time to say to yourself, like, yes, there's your feelings and there's things that come up, but there's also another person here too. So if, let's say, you get triggered by your partner, you're in your feelings and like maybe they don't mean to do that, but now you're just like kind of in like a tizzy. And let's say you start to do something like you're lashing out at them, or then you become spiteful, and then now it just becomes like a mess, right?
World
War III is going on. Now it's like all these different things are being said, and so in that moment, it's like being able to take that pause and take that step back just to see, like, hey, like, this hurt my feelings, but even acknowledging it, that, this is what it is, but then going deeper within, like, well, what's really coming up? See, again, it goes back to looking within to see, well, what is really that's going on? Okay, like, obviously she didn't mean it, but it triggered something. And and I feel small right now, or I feel belittled, I feel whatever you want to call it. However, it's also taking the time to see, like, all right, but your behaviors and everything right now is creating a much bigger problem, and now you guys are at odds. So it goes against, when I think of like pride and all that, what it does is it just, now we're against each other. It's you versus me. We're not really working together as a team. And then your partner's kind of on the outside being like, well, I don't even know what just happened. Like, what did I say that was like, has set you off, kind of.
You hurt my pride.
Yeah, like it's like
you bruised my ego.
Right, and it's like really that's what it comes down to, because it's like because is it really that this person's trying to hurt you, or is it just something that maybe come up that they can share with you that's very simple to the point, but you just didn't want to hear it, or it's hurtful because it's triggering something that's way deep down.
How can someone be better at loosening the grips on their pride and ego so they can be better at being in a relationship? Because I don't think most people even realize how tight they hold on to their pride and ego. If we lined 100 people up right now and we asked 100 people, does your pride and ego affect you in any type of way? I would think that probably about 90% of them would say no. But in actuality, almost every one of them it does.
It does. And it affects it in such a huge way. Like, I was talking to someone before where, I mean, she's like a ball of anxiety, right? Because, like, she just has this fear. I don't know if it's like the fear of her boyfriend cheating on her or just what, So it could be if they're out and he's talking to a girl, anything. It's just like, there's just so much that goes on. And so I was like, well, have you actually like had this conversation and like talked to him about that? But she was like, she has such a huge pride. She's like, no, she would never want to. So she just acts like she'll start a fight or something happens, or it's kind of like she's not really being real about it, you know, and sharing what's really going on inside of her. So now he's just like, I don't know what's going on. So now then he's trying to change his behaviors to try to appease her, but at the same time it's still not
you're not getting to the root of the problem, because the real problem isn't him if he's not doing those things.
Right, no.
The real issue is her pride and ego and not addressing that and not getting to the bottom of it.
Right. So it's like really so it's more so of that, where it's like getting into yourself to say, hey, this is what's going on, and why, what is that, what's the worst that can happen. And so one of the things that I'll take my clients through is I actually take them through like this exercise where I have them actually go to that place, and with their eyes closed, I have them actually go to that place of that biggest fear. So let's say it is him talking to a girl and cheating on you, and usually it will lead to, because I'll be abandoned, then I'll be alone, right, or that thing.
Yeah.
And so in accepting it, choosing it, really like feeling those emotions, letting it come up, and just accepting it for that could potentially happen. Because then what happens is once you accept it and you feel those emotions, it's almost like it neutralizes it. Because now let's go to over here where you're like, okay, what is it that you want? What would you like to see happen? And then it's like, okay, well, I want this. So it's like you're almost choosing both of them. And so as you choose that, you neutralize that level of intensity of emotion and all that fear that's coming up with it. Because that's what it is. It's like you're internal, you're like battling it. It's like you want to trust this person, but then, oh my God, what if this? What if this? So you're never really like fully just relaxed.
It's crazy, the human mind.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, it's crazy. It's just a constant battle. So it's like being able to really accept both of them at the same time. It's just like, it really helps to neutralize it. Because now you're like, oh, well, okay, that'll happen, but most of the time we avoid it.
So pride, ego, and selfishness, it can affect all types of relationships.
Yeah.
As a human being, if that's something you don't work on a personal level, it'll affect not only the relationship you're in with a significant other, but your kids, your parents, your coworkers, everything. Because that pride and that ego and that selfishness, it'll mess you up. Me and my dad have a strained relationship. When I was young, he abandoned me. He wasn't there for the majority of my life. I reached out to him in my 20s, and we started to have an okay relationship. But one thing I realized quickly was that he never tried to build a real bond with me. He liked the fact that now he could portray the image of having a son, and that his son was a good man and he could take some pictures and post them here and there, but he never put in work to develop a real relationship with me. So eventually, we pulled away from each other again. I had reached out to him recently, and when I reached out to him, I was honest with him, and one of the things I said to him was, I chose as a man in my 20s to bring you back into my life, to introduce you to my kids and let you be a grandfather. And, I never expected an apology from you, because it took me to forgive you, not for you to apologize. I had to forgive you first for me to bring you back into my life, which I did. But I think one thing that started to bother me after time was watching his behavior and knowing with his behavior and his past that he never even took the time to say, hey son, I'm sorry. You turned out to be a good man. I apologize. I should have done better. So the fact that he never even took those 10 to 15 seconds to say that kind of started to mess with me. And I addressed that and let him know that. And he didn't respond well to that, his pride and his ego and his selfishness. But that was me being honest. Like, hey man, as a man, I really was a big guy there. Most people wouldn't have forgiven you after the way you were the first 25 years of my life, the things I know about you, and some of those patterns that you started to let flare up when we were dealing with each other. And then, I finally tell you this, and then you have a horrible response to it. It's really hard, man, a lot of times for people to push their pride and ego to the side. And we build up these false illusions in our mind on our pride and our ego. How hard is it when you're working with people to get them past that? Because there's a serious wall there when people have that pride and ego involved. How hard of a task is it for you to push past that with people, or to get people to look within and address that for real?
Yeah, I think it's because it is difficult, especially when I feel when I find it comes to like caregivers as well, right? Because if maybe our parents didn't show up in a way that maybe we thought we needed them or how we wanted it to happen, and so you don't realize how, like you said, you're carrying that for so long, and it really eats away at you. And I think that's one of the things is challenging, is having them see, like you said, no one's saying that what they did was like right or wrong. It's not that your feelings aren't valid, but at what point are you going to take that responsibility to let this go? And what is it costing you by holding on to this resentment or this pride or whatever beliefs that you have and stories that you've created over time, right? Because like you said, we have this illusion of, because we build this up in our mind.
Yeah.
However, once it might take a while to chip through it. If this is a big resistance for people, then yeah, it's like I'm not going to just be able to knock a wall down, or they probably wouldn't be, because they want to almost hold on to it, because who are they without this, without this wall up? And I think sometimes it's weakness as well, right? It's like, well, I need to have this wall up, right? Because then if I don't and actually share my feelings or be vulnerable about it or let this go, then am I a weak person for doing that? Because then they feel like maybe this person got over on them or something. Where it's not. It's just you're freeing yourself, right? You're freeing yourself to release all this pent up emotion built up over time, because it's also blocking the vulnerability that you can have in other relationships too. And I think once people start to kind of see, it's like almost like connecting the dots. When they start to see how these things will actually affect their, the behaviors that they're carrying out in their life, then it starts to be like, oh, I didn't realize that. And I know for me, it's the same kind of thing. Like I had a huge thing, that I was holding on to too as well, because like I love my parents. It was just that I think my dad was going through a lot when we were younger. He had was very depressed, and we don't know that, right, growing up. So there was like this disconnect there in terms, emotionally or whatever. And I just was like, I think he just hates me or something, which it's not.
Yeah, but that's how
our mind works. You don't know, and it just makes all these stories up, and so then you're living in that reality. And then it took time. It really took me, again, sitting with myself to be like, what is this costing me holding on to it? And I remember calling him, and I actually apologized for him, or apologized to him.
Yeah.
I said, I just wanted to apologize because I didn't realize I've been carrying so much resentment towards you over time. And I had no idea really and understand like what you were going through, and I took it so personally. And so it just created a whole different dialogue between my father and I. We had a really great conversation. We were able to sit and have this conversation that I never really had with him. And from that moment on, it was like a shift in the relationship. But was it something that he did? No. It was just something that I was willing to let go and share what it is that was on my mind, and even apologizing for my part in it.
And that's amazing, and I'm super happy for you that played out the way. For people that are watching and listening, I want you guys to understand this, that when you take these steps and the maneuvers like I did and like she did, sometimes they will work out and sometimes they won't. If they work out, then that's amazing. You got something that you didn't have. If it does not work out, you really didn't lose anything because you didn't have it anyways, so why not give it a shot? But be prepared that the scenario could play out either way. as hers played out in a good way, mine did not. I remember the very first time that I went to visit my father, and I went up north. His best friend that he had been friends with his entire life, he said to me, pulled me to the side when I was up there, and he said, Larry, he said, I want to tell you something real quick. And I was like, what's that? And he said, I hope your dad understands the magnitude of you forgiving him and bringing him back into your life. Most human beings wouldn't do that and don't have a heart like that. He said, I hope that he never does anything that mess that up, and I hope he realizes that. He said, unfortunately, I've known your father my entire life, and that's just not the person he is. Now, I didn't let that discourage me.
Right.
Because I'm my own man, right? And I still went forward for quite some time until the patterns and the reality was showing itself very clearly. You know, if you actually care about someone you gave birth to, that, yeah, it's easy for you now because now you don't have to be a father.
Yeah.
Now you don't have to raise them. Now you don't have to hope they turn out good. All these things are done. You don't have to worry about grandkids because beautiful grandkids have already been handed to you. So in this scenario, you would think that this particular person would say, okay, I'm gonna go visit my son a couple times a year. Let's go, I'm gonna go down there, we'll hang out, we'll spend some time together, he'll come up here, we'll develop a friendship, a relationship. That would be like, best case scenario, kind of like what you just named. But instead, what I got was, hey, you can come up here once a year, I can take some pictures with you and I can post them on Facebook and it'll make me look like a good father. That type of stuff, with zero getting to know you as a person, like spending time with you, stuff like that. Eventually enough was enough, I told you about the conversation I had with him recently. But if someone's listening or watching this, do not feel bad for me, because in every single situation in life, you learn and you grow. That made me grow as a man. And if you change any of that, I wouldn't be the man I am today. Those type of situations don't break me. Those type of situations make me. For every success story or mentor or good person in your life that shows you something or teaches you something and you apply that to your life, you can do the opposite with negative. So if someone is in your life, and let's take my dad out of the equation. Let's say you do not have a good mother, and your mom's not a good mom. She's not there for you. She says things to put you down. You can use that. You can use that as fuel and motivation to be a great mother or father yourself and say, this is what I had, and I'm not going to give this to my child. I'm going to give the opposite to my child. So, I just use that for motivation to push me and to help other people. Because now when I'm mentoring kids, because there's a couple kids right now that I'm mentoring, when I talk to them, one of them, they don't have a father, and the other one, their father passed away 5 years ago. I'm able to talk to them from a viewpoint of someone else that raised themselves to be a man without another man around, which is a very hard thing to do, and help these young men and explain certain things to them and let them know that if they ever need help with certain things, I'm there for them. So there's a positive in every negative. It's just what you do with it. All right, so let's move on. Let's check out some of these other questions. What does a session sitting down with a relationship coach consist of, and what could someone take away from it?
Oh, that's great. Sitting down, in a session looks like really uncovering like who you are, right? Starting to get to know who you are and where your patterns are. What are some of your beliefs that you're holding on to? Some of your goals that you want to see in your relationship. So we kind of uncover a lot there. So we kind of know like these pieces to the puzzle, right? And where you want to go with it. And then from there, what we do is really start to work on these core beliefs, these core wounds, reprogramming that, rewiring some of these beliefs in your unconscious mind, and then really understanding what your needs are. Needs are like huge. So oftentimes we are feeling pain. Usually it comes from two things. One, it's because we have this something is being triggered. There's a core wound that hasn't really been healed, you've been looked at, or there's a need that's not being met. But oftentimes we don't even know what that is, so it's hard for us to give it to ourselves, and also getting it from communicating what we need from other people. So really understanding what your relationship to that is, uncovering that, but then finding healthier strategies to get those needs met, right? Because there's coping mechanisms that we have, and when you start to understand what your coping mechanisms are, sometimes they're not always the healthiest. Well, what is it that you're actually needing, and how can we get that in a way that's healthy?
More than a warm body.
Yes. Wow. Totally more than that, right? And the other thing is it's understanding that, so you can do this on a consistent basis. So again, when I was telling you about having this like bucket, right? And if you're trying to get all these things from the outside, it's like little just drops in your bucket. But when you start to really apply this and fulfill your own needs and understanding this, it's almost just like turning the faucet on. Now you're really filling up your cup so that you're able to give to other people. And of course we create boundaries, and then I teach them how to communicate those boundaries to other people.
If you think that you're going to marry someone or be in a relationship with someone based off of sex, or based off of money, or based off of the status that person has and might give you now, you are wrong. And if you think for one single second that that's going to make you happy internally and your life is going to be okay because of that, you are dead wrong.
Yep, 1,000%. Because again, those things are fleeting, right? And if you're always having to get something to fill yourself up, then it's just like a constant chase. That's what it is. It's like that constant chase. So the money over time is just how much money do you really need, right? To like constantly just be making yourself feel better. So then you start to fall down that trap of like having all the things, but then it's really not fulfilling you anyway.
All the material things that don't even matter.
No, don't even matter, because what are you going to do with it? Like really, it just sits there. There's no connection there. There's nothing that you can, it's great, yes, to be able to share experiences or go and do the things that you want to do, but ultimately it's, what is it internally that you're actually looking for? And usually like when it comes to people want money, there's an emotion that's tied to that. They want to feel power. Maybe they want to feel security from it. Maybe they want to have money because they want to go and do fun things with their family. Maybe they want that because, I don't know, because maybe they want to have that comfort, right? But if you look to see what they really want, and if they want to have power, if they want to have security, and then you're able to give that to yourself internally, that's a huge shift.
How many times have you had to help people out of bad relationships that they put themselves in based off of sex?
Oh my gosh. Whoa.
I asked you that question because as someone that has been coaching myself for years, that is like the broken record that I'm constantly have to deal with. Yeah. So like I was just waiting to see what your reaction was going to be.
Yeah, it's just, well, because that's the thing, and that's where I think a lot of times people will be in like the situationships too, right? Because it's kind of like, well, this is good, it's fulfilling, I need to have this. So they just keep this person around for that reason, or maybe it's multiple people, but then at the same time, you're not really getting what you want. And I literally just had this conversation with somebody yesterday, of course, and that was the one thing that was going on, because it's like she wants a husband, and so it's like, this is what we want, however,
this is what you have.
It's like
this isn't going to work.
It's like Joey comes around and he's so fun and he's good looking, all the things, and then they start, that's what's going on. And because that was like her, she wanted to fulfill that, but she was very clear on, but this is obviously a casual thing, and this is really what I want.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, again, it's like, what do you choose? I mean, you could go back down that road, or you could stay focused on what it is that you want and just leave that alone, but it's hard because now she's already, you're already attached to this person.
Yes, unfortunately. It's like trying to pull two mortar bricks apart sometimes. Like really? All right, so look, we're having fun with it, but in all seriousness, like that is something that I've had to deal with helping people. And as a relationship coach, I already knew what your answer was going to be. That's something because every person I talk to, that is an issue constantly. But that's the world we live in today.
Yep.
So the last question I have for you today is, it's important to have good relationship with parents, kids, coworkers, neighbors, etc. What advice would you give to strengthening those relationships?
Forgiveness, I think, is a huge thing that comes up. Being able to, if it's like, again, if you want to have a better relationship with someone and you're always waiting for the other person, then it's just like, it's never going to happen. And like you were saying, if you're stepping forward to try something and then it just doesn't end up working out, at least you did your part, right? But I also feel like there are times, like you said, that maybe maybe people don't even talk to like parents, or maybe they don't have the relationship, or and being able to forgive them.
Yeah.
But whether it's like you're writing a letter to them but you never give it to them, you can burn it, you can do whatever, and also forgiving yourself too, because I find that we carry a lot of guilt and shame from previous relationships, but if we're able to strengthen relationships around, sometimes we're carrying that, and it affects other relationships. So it's like, hey, being able to kind of like clear out whatever is.
That's really big, man, because forgiving someone, people tend to hold on to stuff a lot. So it makes a lot of sense. That's a really good answer, really insightful answer. I hope the people that are watching pay attention and heard that, to strengthen a relationship with people that, aren't your significant other, but are very close to you. Parents, kids, coworkers, neighbors, etc., best friends, whatever. Forgiveness. Because just like they made mistakes, trust and believe you've made some mistakes too.
Absolutely, yeah. And it goes back to the pride and the ego. It's like, okay, well, yeah, I'm sitting here stuck on what they did to me, but there's still two people in the equation, right? And so if you're not able to talk to this person because whatever reason, I remember, I think it was like COVID, because we have time, and I think I wrote out, it was like 100 letters.
Yeah.
And maybe even more than that over time. But it was like anything that just popped up that I was just like stuck on, I was just like writing it and just like really releasing it.
Yeah.
I will say that it was huge because I felt so much lighter.
I was about to say, you probably felt like all the pressure was relieved off of you, like, whoa.
Yeah. And I think what it does is there's this acceptance piece. It's like, okay, I can't change anything, but why am I holding on to this? And just accepting, like, all right, this is what happened, that would happen. And I think also too, that was a huge thing for when we talk about like my conversation with my dad. It was like I was done trying to hold on to this expectation of what I feel like he should be doing or shouldn't be doing. I was able to let that go, and then just accept, like, it is what it is, and kind of move on from there and develop a new kind of relationship, in a different way. But it's the same thing with, if you have friends, or if you have other coworkers, or just anyone in your life that maybe there's something that you're really holding on to. I always find that I go there first. Like, what am I holding on to that I need to let go? And then it's like, okay, what is one thing that I can do? And maybe it might be a phone call to just reconnect with that person, and seeing where they're at. Because at the end of the day, we're feeling some kind of way, but I'm sure they are too.
Yeah. So obviously this is a podcast. We live in the United States of America, where people have very short attention spans these days, and we've been making them hold on for quite some time. But this has been an amazing conversation, and some real knowledge has been dropped today. Before we wrap this up, I do want to touch on one last thing, and the reason I want to touch on it is because you're a female, and you're a relationship coach. There's this sentiment out there in the country right now about feminism and toxic masculinity.
Yeah.
Right? And I just want to kind of like get your opinion on that. So I have this thing as a man, right? I don't believe in toxic masculinity. I believe that guys can be dicks, guys can be prideful, guys can be jerks. They can be a lot of those things. But just because you are a certain way as a man doesn't mean you have to be those things.
Right.
So I believe, almost like Dr. Jordan Peterson. Dr. Jordan Peterson says that a real man should have every single tool in the tool belt possible. You should be a man's man, an alpha male. You should be an intellectual man that is very well read and very smart and able to defend yourself verbally with your vocabulary. You should be a man that's on your finances and on your game and has your finances in order. You should be a good man that loves and respects your family and takes care of your family and has a heart and compassion and shows love. You should also be a tough man that's willing to defend your family and doesn't take stuff from people and will stand their ground and be a man and teach other people how to be a man and be a leader. So I don't believe in none of that BS. I believe, like Dr. Jordan Peterson said, you should have every single tool in the tool belt. And to have one or two or three or four and not have some is limiting yourself. Why not have all of them? And just, that doesn't mean I have to use all of them. That just means I have all of the tools. If I need this tool, I pull it out. If I need this tool, I pull it out. But why, let's just say there's 10 tools, why would I only want 7 of those tools? Why wouldn't I want all 10 of those tools? So if one of those situations present itself, I have the tool to represent myself properly. So I don't believe in any of that BS. I just believe that sometimes people are jerks or people are rude or people can be a certain way. But I don't think that that's tied into masculinity, because I think and I know a lot of really solid and good men that are men's men that would be the person that if you were getting mugged would put their life on the line to save you, not even knowing you.
Yeah, and I think, and I totally, I agree with that, where it's like, it's, as a man, like you just said, you know, you're talking about like the tool belt, but I agree. I think it's like, that's what men, I think, strive for. Real men that obviously want to have that type of foundation, right? You want to be able to stand for something. You want to be able to give to, you know, to your family, and to be able to lead in that way. I think when they talk about like the toxic masculinity, it's almost like some of that has, I think what it is, it's like, they say it's like they're more feminine now, right?
They want to soften men and make them women these days.
They want, well, that's it. I think what it is that they want that woman in a way to take care, not like a woman take care of them, but in a way it's like they don't want to, I don't say like they're lazy. It's not that, but it's just they're not necessarily building their toolbox, their toolkit. They're kind of just like not really sure of who they are internally. Right, and
because in America they've started to shame men for being men, but yet you are a man.
Yes.
You run off of testosterone, and you have these innate feelings to be certain ways. And I'm not saying run out there and be loud. That's not what I'm saying.
No.
I'm saying be in discipline and be respectful, but be a man. But it's hard when you're wired internally to be that way, but your entire society is now shaming you for being that way and telling you shouldn't. So it caused like this identity crisis of like, wait a second, should I be this way? Should I not be this way? So, you know, I think it leaves us off balance.
Yeah, and I think it's like when I think of like masculine in that way, I think of the masculine and the feminine energy that we both have. You have, you know, I have masculine and feminine energy, you have masculine and feminine energy. And I think when they talk about the toxic masculine, it's like they're so in their masculine, where like you said one thing, which was like that self-discipline. I find that it's almost like not there, where they're running around doing all the things, you know, with like this girl or that girl, or it's not necessarily for good per se, or they're very like wounded in that way that maybe they have no idea who they are, so they're projecting it onto other people, and it comes off as they're like almost emotionally not stable. They're not grounded in who they are. They're not grounded. And I think that tends to be for a woman in her feminine that wants a man to lead, right? That's not there. It's scary, right? Because then they can't really surrender. They don't really feel comfortable in your presence, because that leadership, that man, you know, that way of like leading isn't there. But it's kind of almost like they say toxic in a toxic way, but I think it, like you just said, I think it's just with people. Think about people that are, like you said, are not aware, just kind of run on autopilot, right? It's like they are considered toxic people. So I think that's where it's basically, I think if they're describing
if a man's a good man, if he's not cheating on you, if he's not disrespecting you, if he's being a leader, if he's taking care of his family, in today's age, you are in the prime of your life. Would you prefer a real man, or would you prefer one of these soft, watered down men that our society is now producing?
No, exactly. I couldn't.
Okay.
Yeah, like I couldn't do that, because if they're too soft in that way, it's like then the woman starts to take the lead, and over time, I really do feel like we're just not built like that. We're just not. We're not there for that reason. That's why guys have like muscles and do all the things in that way in a girl. But that's what happens is like they start taking care of it. The guy's not really stepping up.
The chemicals in your body, one is run off of testosterone and one is run off of estrogen. So there you go.
Exactly.
The answer is in our chemical makeup and our
Yeah.
DNA.
Right.
And I'm not saying anything bad about women because I think women can do absolutely anything in this world. I've always encouraged my daughters to do that.
Absolutely.
My wife is absolutely amazing, super smart and brilliant, and she can do anything. But there are roles that men are supposed to do, and that's just not the case anymore.
Right.
So if you guys are watching this, step up to the plate, take the challenge. Larry Dawson said, man up.
Yeah.
Barb,
absolutely.
thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Please tell everyone really quickly your website and your email, how they can get in touch with you.
So my website is thesecureheart.com, so you can go there to learn more about me and to how you can work with me if you're looking for some kind of support. Or you can find me on Instagram at thesecureheart, and yeah, that's pretty much it.
Check her out. She's amazing, and she dropped some awesome knowledge on you guys today. If you're watching or listening to this video, make sure you like, comment, share, and subscribe. Without your support, this wouldn't be possible. Thanks again for tuning in to another episode of the Be the Best You podcast. Until next time, try until you fly.